All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to AI Literacy and Ethics. We are excited that you get to join us. We are going to introduce our team to start off. My name is Amanda Moore. I am an Innovation Coordinator at Avon Community Schools. I've been in education for quite a while. My background is typically in elementary, and I've been working in and with AI for since maybe 2019. I started working on a few projects then and helping to write some curriculum. So I enjoy learning about it and excited to see what's next.
Hey everyone, my name is Megan Humber. I'm an educational researcher at Indiana University. So I got my PhD here at IU a couple of years ago in learning sciences, and now I work on a team that designs AI tools for learning. And we also do a lot of work about AI ethics and talking with students and teachers about what they want out of AI tools and how these tools can help students learning and also the risks behind them. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you today.
Hello, I'm Steph Duda. I'm an innovation coordinator in Avon Community Schools. I've been in education for this is my 23rd year. And my background is mostly elementary school, and I taught STEM for a few years before moving into this position. And I'm happy that you guys are here. Our agenda today is what students need to know, what skills do students need to do to be thoughtful and critical AI users, AI misconceptions and common ways that we misunderstand AI, examples of ethical issues, current issues that you can discuss with your students, and educator rights in AI. What rights do we have in the age of AI?
All right, so to start off with what students need to know, our students are already using AI quite a lot on their own. We know that they're either using it overtly or they're using it integrated into apps and programs that they're already using. And they don't necessarily need a lot of our help to use AI. In fact, companies are making it increasingly easy to engage with AI for a couple reasons. One, it helps them to train their AI models because we're interacting with it. And two, when we do that, we are unintentionally feeding it our data, which makes their model stronger and stronger. So the easier the model is to engage with, the stronger it can become. So our kids, when they interact with these AI models, whether they're an overt LLM or whether they're integrated into a program, unknowingly are helping the model to become better and better. So that's one thing that our students should be aware of. When we're thinking about teaching our students about AI, we want to help them have that broader view rather than just focusing on how to use AI tools. We want to help them have a deep understanding of AI and to help them grow skills so that they can be thoughtful users and critical users of AI. And when we think about that, we think of four main ideas. First, it's important for our students to be able to tell or to have the ability to stop and consider so that they can think about whether or not a tool that they're engaging with is using AI. Why is that important? There's a lot of reasons. We'll touch on a few of them today, including things like privacy, bias, sustainability. Um, but as consumers of content, we can be aware of who is creating the content that we're consuming and that how that content is shaping our ideas and our thoughts. And if we know who the author is or who is behind the model, that is empowering information. Secondly, we want our students to have an understanding of how AI works. Empowering students with that information can help to combat this current reality where students are led to just blindly trust AI outputs. So rather than just blindly trusting, when they understand how AI works, they'll have an understanding of how AI can be wrong. And then they can think critically about one, when to use AI, and two, whether or not they can trust the output. Third, we want our students to be responsible users, just like we want them to be with any technology that they use. And it's more than just the head knowledge because we know often that our students can answer the questions correctly about responsible use, but putting it into action is another thing. So we want our students to not only know those things, but to do things like protect their identity online, protect their personal data, and take action online when they see things that are concerning. And finally, the fourth topic is students should be aware of the impacts that AI has on certain groups of people and also on our environment, along with some of the ethical issues surrounding AI. Um, in all, these four topics together we call AI literacy. It's so much more than just using AI. It's being a critical consumer and a conscious user of these different tools.
So now that we've talked a little bit about the importance of AI literacy and what that means, we're going to explore some common misconceptions that many of us encounter when we're learning about AI. So a lot of us, when we first start using AI, it can seem really magical. It's fast, it's powerful, it can do so many things, and we often misunderstand how it works and what its flaws are because it seems so flashy and so interesting at first glance. So we're going to talk about three different main misconceptions that your students might have about AI so that you feel prepared both to chat about these ideas with them in the classroom, but also just to talk with folks in everyday life about your encounters with AI. So one big misconception that I encounter a lot is that AI is so smart and so powerful that it must be smarter than us. But this is actually not at all true. But before I get into why that's not true, I want to talk a little bit about why it feels true. So why does AI seem so smart? Well, there's a lot of things that it's just really good at. It can make a lot of things really fast. It can generate pages of text, images, it can create videos. It knows a lot of information because it can pull sources from all over the internet, and it can synthesize all these sources a lot faster than you or I can when we're reading pages and pages of text. It also is designed intentionally to sound like a person. It speaks really confidently, even when it's making things up. So it's important for us to remember that something that's both true for AI chatbots and for people is that just because someone sounds really confident doesn't mean they actually know what they're talking about or really understand the information they're sharing. So we have to remind our students that AI tools are not independent people. They're pieces of technology. They're designed by people for specific tasks, and they're really good at those specific tasks that they're designed for. But that doesn't mean that we can rely on them and trust what they produce the way that we would rely on and trust an expert that has created something for us. So, and that's because AI does not actually think the way a person does. It seems to know a lot of information, but it's actually using really sophisticated math to make guesses about what something should sound like or what something should look like. So if you read the sentence, the cat blank, it brings up all sorts of information and memories related to what you know about cats. You might imagine what a cat looks like. You might think fondly of your own cat or a friend's cat. And you know lots of possible words that could fill in this blank, including the word meowed. The AI also knows the next word should probably be meowed, but it doesn't know it the way that we do. So we understand the meaning behind that sentence, but what the AI knows is the mathematical probabilities behind each of those words. So it isn't saying which word makes the most sense here. It's actually saying, according to the data I have of what people have written in the past, what word usually comes after cat. So why do we care about this? Why does this matter? Either way, we get a sentence that makes sense. So why do we care that the AI isn't thinking the same way that we do? Well, it matters because while AI can generate sentences that sound really intelligent, it doesn't know what those words actually mean that it's producing, or if the sentence that is generated is true, or if the context in which it's saying the sentence is appropriate socially or culturally or morally. So all it knows is the probability that people usually put these words in that order. But if we want students to treat the AI output as something that is meaning, if they treat the output as something that is meaningful and intentional and trustworthy instead of something that was put together using fancy math, then we put ourselves in this danger of misusing AI tools for purposes that they weren't designed for. And so you see this when people use AI chatbots as therapists or as friends or as a search engine, which Amanda will talk about next. But essentially, we want to help our students be intentional and careful that the AI is not all-knowing and it shouldn't be used for every purpose. So how do we bring this idea into the classroom? Well, we can first off discuss with students the difference between making really good guesses and actually understanding the content of something. So you can imagine the difference between a student who's memorized sentences in a textbook and can repeat them back to you versus a student who actually understands the concept and understands how the ideas connect. And there's a difference there in how you're thinking about the idea. You could also work with your students to make a list of what AI seems to do well and what it struggles with to understand what was it built for and what uses should we not be using it for because it's not actually designed to do that well. You can also have students explore how the machine learning under the hood works to understand how does AI process language and how is that different than how we process language and think about ideas. And so Semantris, which is a game created by Google, is a great example of this. It allows students to type in words to try to get the AI to sort the words and pick like the word lake, move it down to the bottom. And so in the screenshot, you can see how the AI is associating all of these different words with the word water and which ones seem the closest and which ones seem the furthest away. And these kinds of activities can help students understand that the AI is thinking differently than they are.
So another common misconception is that AI is better than Google. But in reality, it just depends on your purpose and what you need. So the idea here is that not only does AI and a search engine have a different purpose, but it has a different process. So generative AI, the process, just like Megan explained, it's just using, I like how Megan, you said fancy math to predict letters and words. That's what it does. That's its process. On the other hand, a search engine like Google does something different. It uses the keywords that you put in the search bar, plus it uses other data that it can find on your computer, like cookies. That's what those things are, not the tasty snack. Location data, if you have your location data turned on. And then this other complicated thing called search engine optimization, which, if you'd like a rabbit hole, you can take that later. But it uses that to gather sources and present those sources to you. And then you can choose a source to read and find information. So, is AI better than Google? Well, it depends what you need and what you want. For example, I was cooking with my teenage niece recently, and she needed the conversion for pints and cups. And so I said, well, do you know the gallon man? As any elementary teacher would. And she just looked at me like I was weird. And she told me she would just chat GPT it. So then I continued as an educator and tried to explain how Google and chat GPT are different. And I must have been a little bit excited because she told me I was kind of weird. And then I told her the conversion that she needed, and we moved on. However, the point is, they're not the same, and we would use them in different situations. Would ChatGPT have given her the correct conversion? Maybe, probably. It probably would have because it's a simple thing and it's used a lot on the internet correctly. So there, it could have drawn that commonly from its data, but not always. Just last year in 2025, the Chicago Sun-Times published its summer reading list of 15 books to read that summer. Only, oops, the author used AI to create the list, and only 5 of the titles were genuine books. The other 10 were just made up titles and summaries. So, can we trust AI to give us the information we need? It depends on our purpose. On our next slide, it shows us what these two tools can be good for. So if you're wanting facts like cups and pints, Google is your best tool. That's where the facts are. Now, to be fair, we know that there are incorrect facts, but you can look and find and cross check and do all those things that your teacher has taught you to do, and you can make them proud. You can also go and find information about books that you might like to read this summer. If you want to use AI, things that would be good if you want to create something new, if you want to brainstorm, if you want to synthesize large amounts of text or train a machine learning model, all of those things are great for using AI. Two different tools with two different purposes. So is one better than the other? Probably, depending on the job you need to do. Now, you've probably noticed if you use Google that they are interacting now. So, when you do a Google search, oftentimes, but not always, you may see an AI overview. What's that about? Well, what's happening is that a large language model is essentially going and synthesizing some of the sources for you. And it will even cite some of the sources based on some of the information it provides. That's that's cool. I appreciate that it's citing sources. Some of the downsides to this is one, the user, you and I, didn't necessarily choose that we wanted to use AI for that search. In fact, I intentionally went to Google because I know what Google is good for, and I didn't want to use AI. So it's using, Megan will share a little bit later about the resources that it takes to use an AI model, and it just used all those resources that weren't necessary and I didn't want to use. So that's a bummer. It also takes away your agency as a user in choosing which sources got summarized. So I think it can be a helpful shortcut, but it's just there. There's also no easy off button to turn this feature off. If you want to, I guess, get around it, you have to go up at the top where there's these filters, and under the More button, you have to click on Web, and then it'll show you only web searches. But you have to kind of opt out of this AI overview every time you do a new search. So, some okay things about it interacting, and some things that I feel not so great about. But overall, AI in Google, one is better than the other, but it just depends on the job you need done.
Is AI neutral? AI is often presented as neutral, but it's important for us and especially our students to understand that it's not. AI is trained on data, and data reflects human decisions, human perspectives, and human biases. So, whatever patterns exist in the data, accurate or not, AI learns and repeats them. A simple way to explain this to your students is with something like ice cream. If an AI system only is given data that tells it about chocolate ice cream, it won't question that there's any other flavors. It will confidently report that chocolate ice cream is the only ice cream that there is, and it will have it as its preferred flavor, which we all know that chocolate fudge brownie is actually the best. So there's that. but that it's going to come back with just the chocolate flavor because that's the only story it's been told. The same thing happens when more complex topics. If there's a lot of misinformation or skewed data on a subject, AI doesn't automatically filter that out. It often amplifies it because it sees it as a strong pattern. With AI, patterns are the key. This is where the conversation becomes really important in education. AI can be incredibly helpful when patterns are meaningful, such as early disease detection. They're using AI to detect cancer earlier through pattern observations. So that's amazing. So that's an instance where pattern recognize. Why can't I say that word right now? Recognizing patterns can actually save lives. But the same pattern recognition can cause harm in areas like hiring or discipline, where historical data may already reflect bias. In those cases, AI can reinforce existing inequities instead of correcting them. AI is not going to know the difference. So a key question we can bring to students is, how can the same tool be both used in a harmful and helpful way? And more importantly, how do we critically evaluate what AI gives us? We need kids to recognize that they are the ones that can identify some of these biases. And then building on the idea that AI reflects data, we also have to recognize that humans decide what data goes in and what gets left out. That means algorithms aren't purely logical systems. They are shaped by human choices at every step. What problem to solve, what data to use, and what outcomes matter. So when we say AI made this decision, it can sound like no one is responsible, but that's not exactly true. Believing AI is neutral removes accountability because it shifts the blame from the people to the technology. This is an important conversation to bring into the classroom. We can ask students, is it even possible for something created by humans to be completely neutral? I find that hard to believe. But if it's not, then the better question is, how do we recognize bias, question it, and use these tools responsibly? Because our students aren't just going to use AI, they're going to shape how it's used in the future. I was excited to learn about the large language model that was built to reflect experiences, culture, and history of Black and Brown people more accurately. It's called Latimer, named after Lewis Latimer, an African American inventor. While many LLMs amplify bias, inaccuracy, or deletion of cultural data, Latimer strives to recognize, restore cultural histories and correct biases. I love the quote that's on that slide, stating, "We can't fix the world, but we can represent the totality of it more accurately, reducing the biases of cultural distortion in history as told by the victors." I think maybe all right. Ethical issues. Um, so let's look at what this can actually look like in practice. In one study, researchers tested AI systems by giving them hundreds of fake resumes. The qualifications were similar, but the names were changed to reflect different genders and racial identities. What they found was a clear pattern. The AI consistently favored candidates with white male associated names over equally qualified candidates with female or Black associated names. So the question is, why does that happen? It comes back to that data. These systems are trained on historical hiring data. And historically, many industries have hired more white men. So the AI learns that pattern and then treats it as a signal of who is most qualified, even when that pattern reflects bias, not ability. We can remove all gendered words from a resume and still get the same findings due to word usage and even things like extracurricular activities that someone participates in. In other words, the AI isn't making an objective decision, it's repeating a historical one. And this is where it connects directly to our classrooms. If students believe AI is neutral, they may not question those outcomes. We need kids to using their brains to question AI. So if we help them understand where those patterns come from, then they're able to start asking better questions like, who was represented in this data? Who wasn't? And how might that affect the result? That shift from accepting AI outputs to questioning them is really the goal. During the COVID pandemic, contactless thermometers became common in schools, stores, and airports. These handheld devices let people check temperatures from a distance. And around the same time, people began testing image recognition systems like Google's Vision AI. It wasn't tested very well, and they released it rather quickly. And looking through the historical evidence of releasing things quickly, it's not a great thing. They need to test it more before they release it. But there's that whole got to be the first. So when they put an image in that AI, Google's Vision AI, the system correctly identified the white hand holding a monocular. which isn't accurate, but that was 6 years ago. So there's that. However, when the same image was recreated using a black hand, the AI labeled it as a hand holding a gun. That error may sound shocking, but it helps us understand an important truth. AI learns from the data it's given. If the training images contain more examples of lighter skin tones, or if darker skin tones are underrepresented, the system becomes less accurate for some groups of people. While it's easy to think, oh, it's a mislabeled picture, it's not just that simple. Facial recognition systems have also made serious mistakes. There have been multiple documented wrongful arrests linked to incorrect AI facial recognition matches. Research has shown that these systems are often less accurate for Black and Asian individuals than for white individuals. So how do we build a fairer AI? And I think that goes back to the Latimer. Check that out. I put the slide in wrong. There it is. I'm sorry. That's the Latimer AI. I mean, it's not. It's his picture. Sorry. That was my quote from earlier. I had it in the wrong place.
All right. So another ethical issue dealing with AI has to do with surveillance and privacy. So for a few minutes, let's just be politely skeptical or politely paranoid. Either way, um, AI systems need lots of data to run. And like we just heard from Steph, more diverse data is better. So where is the line between gathering useful data for a company and the user infringing on our privacy? And I think as a society, we all might answer that question a little bit differently based on our comfort, our beliefs, and just our day-to-day norms. And that's okay. So I'm going to share three real examples of AI use that might challenge your thinking around the topic of privacy and surveillance. And I'm just going to invite you to remain politely skeptical or paranoid, whichever you choose. Okay, in the first example, this takes place in China. A school system in China is using AI headbands that track brain activity during class. It seems very futuristic, but this is actually from a handful of years ago. The data is used by the teacher in real time to know who's focused, their degree of focus, who needs help, and how to better maximize their instructional time, and so on. There's other things they can do too. The company that made this has full access to all the data, and the data is transmitted directly to parents in a daily report. So, as teachers, it might seem like a great insight into how our students are doing, who's focused, who needs help. But some are wondering about student privacy and how the use of this tool is impacting their well-being and their mental health. One of the students who was interviewed explained the pressure that they felt to remain focused every minute that they had the headband on. And as a people pleaser and as somebody who likes to do well in school, I could imagine also feeling extremely pressured to always be doing my best, but not knowing because I don't know how to make my brain have the right wavelengths, you know? So, this is one example of where is the line and has it been crossed? Next is an example that you may have seen as a Super Bowl commercial. Ring had a Super Bowl commercial showing their search party feature, and it raised a lot of privacy concerns among Ring users and Amazon users because Amazon is the parent company for Ring. The idea of search party is that if a user of Ring loses a pet, all they need to do is upload a picture of their pet to the app, and then in their neighborhood, all of the Ring cameras will activate and scan and try to match the picture to what they've scanned using computer vision and machine learning. So, seems like a great use to try to find lost pets. However, there were some issues. While this option or while this feature is free, it's also automatically turned on. And Ring users have to go in and manually turn it off if they don't want if they don't want their Ring doorbell camera used for that application. Some people were concerned that the data gained from this feature might be used for surveillance purposes, even uh, possibly by law enforcement, or if other individuals may like hack in and gain access of Ring doorbell cameras. The Super Bowl ad caused so much concern that Ring actually canceled their partnership with a tech company that worked directly with law enforcement to help solve crimes. So there was some outrage, and then they had to make some decisions in order to appease their customers. So where is the line, and was it crossed here? And our third example. Shopping is made more convenient, which sounds great to me because I'm busy. But in busy places like stadiums and airports, Amazon Go might be an option for you. With the right app, all you have to do is walk into the store, choose the items you want. No waiting in line. You don't even have to talk to a cashier if that's something that bothers you. And then you just walk out. Computer vision, sensors, and the app on your phone take care of making sure that each customer is charged for whatever items that they chose and walked out with. So it seems like a dream shopping experience. No waiting, pick up the things you like, and out you go. However, in this situation, convenience has been traded for specific data. And that specific data is recognizing your face and tying it to your financial data or your bank account or your credit card account. So that might be something that concerns some people with this type of shopping. Okay, my friends. Stay politely paranoid. Onward to our next ethical issue.
So the third ethical issue that we're going to talk about is the long-term sustainability of AI tools and the impact that AI is having on our environment and our natural resources. This is something that I'm personally very passionate about. It's something I've been learning more and more about over the past couple of years. Initially, when I started to learn about AI, there was not a lot of information out there about how AI was impacting the environment. Thankfully, it's becoming more and more of a hot topic. There's more investigative reporting happening. So we're learning a lot more about what is the impact currently and in the future on our natural resources. So to take a step back, for those of you who aren't familiar, AI needs data centers. And in fact, our entire internet needs data centers to run. So data centers are basically huge warehouses full of computer servers. These servers run all sorts of things on the internet, from online shopping to hosting websites to storing the things that you upload to Google Drive. So companies build these data centers to make all of these technologies work and communicate with each other, and AI tools are no different. So what is different about AI is that it requires a lot of computer servers in order to function and to run on a daily basis. And they need much more power than a typical laptop or cell phone or a typical website that's hosted on one of these servers. So this map here shows all of the data centers that we had in the US in 2024. On this map, there's between 1,200 and 1,300 data centers in the US, which was already a huge jump from the roughly 300 data centers we had back in 2010. So the data centers that power AI need a lot of water to cool down their servers. So that's one of the first ways in which AI is impacting our environment. The largest ones of these data centers can use up to millions of gallons of water every single day per data center to cool down the servers. And how this works is, I'm going to simplify it a lot, but essentially they bring the water in, and this is fresh, drinkable water usually. They pass it through the computer systems to pull out a lot of the heat that the computers are generating. And then a lot of that water evaporates into the environment and takes the heat with it. And then they infuse new cool water into the system, and it's a cycle. Some of the water is reused where it can, but a lot of the water that is used for this kind of evaporative cooling goes into the environment, evaporates, can't immediately be put back into the city water system. So this is important to understand because as you can see in the circled areas, a lot of these data centers are built in neighborhoods that already have strained water systems. So they're built in desert areas like Arizona, California, Utah, and Colorado, places where drought is already a common problem, and these communities are vulnerable to water scarcity, and have, a lot of them don't have the systems in place to deal with this increased water demand. So a lot of these data centers are also drawing on city fresh water, because AI is a fairly new thing, and this demand for AI data centers is so new that a lot of regulations are not in place. So typical factories that draw on water usually have their own pipes, their own separate infrastructure that does not impact city water, so that the factory getting their water is not interrupting your ability to get water to your house. But a lot of these AI data centers are just plugged directly into the city water system, meaning that if they are drawing too much water, it could be impacting your water pressure at your house. So that's a lot of detail to help us understand that, because AI requires all of this processing power and we need to build more and more data centers to keep up with the creation of all these AI tools, it is going to have a bigger and bigger impact on the water systems of these already strained neighborhoods. Another thing to think about as we build more and more data centers is that they also produce air pollution. And again, unfortunately, often in neighborhoods that are already dealing with poor air quality. So you can see some of these circles show that these AI data centers tend to be built in clusters. So I think Virginia has the highest density, some of these towns there, but you see there's also clusters in Chicago, there's clusters throughout California. So they're not spread equally across different communities. They're often concentrated in particular neighborhoods. And the more data centers, the more air pollution you have, it can really harm the health of local residents. So not only triggering asthma, but also leading to long-term heart and lung damage based on the poor quality of air that you're breathing. Unfortunately, companies tend to prioritize building where there's already locations that have the power and the water infrastructure that they need, meaning that a community that already has a data center is more likely to have more and more and more warehouses built in this area because they already know that the area can handle the power and water needs that they have. But these aren't being built with the community health in mind. Not as important as air pollution, but still worth noticing is that noise pollution is also an issue when you have all of these data centers in one place. Business Insider did a really interesting investigative journalism report where they went to Virginia and interviewed folks who live in these neighborhoods about what it's like to live in a community with so many data centers. And a lot of them mentioned like it's harder to fall asleep. You can hear actually the drone of the data centers when you live near to them. So all of this to say, locals in these neighborhoods often have little control over which companies are buying up the land and building data centers and what happens to their community as the demand for AI increases over time. And then finally, possibly the most obvious impact on our environment to most folks is that AI requires, like all technology, a lot of electricity. Unfortunately, AI does require a lot more electricity than the typical laptop cell phone. And as we make the models bigger and bigger, as we retrain them, we need more water and more electricity. So going back to Steph's point about bias and how one of the ways to mitigate bias is to retrain the models with better data, to make them bigger, to give them more diverse data sets. Unfortunately, the downside to that is that every time we retrain this model, every time we make it bigger and better, we're also increasing how much it's harming the environment. And to be clear, like this issue didn't start with AI. Technology has always had an environmental cost, but we're more and more aware of it because of how power hungry AI tools specifically are. And this can strain local power grids that aren't ready for this increase in demand. You can see in these graphs here from Pew Research Center, our household electricity costs are going up as the demand for electricity increases. Our consumption total in the US of electricity is also just exponentially rising as we build all these new data centers. And important to note, the map I showed you on the last slide, there were about 1,200 to 1,300 data centers in 2024. Only 2 years later, that's now over 4,000. So the expansion is rapidly, rapidly increasing, and it's making it really important for us to understand as consumers of technology, what is the long-term goal here and what is the long-term cost? Because some of the statistics are a little scary. Like there are statistics out there saying that we are using as much electricity as an entire country just on running our US data centers. So as we continue to have a demand for AI and have a demand for all these advanced technologies, we have to think about, how are we preserving our resources? Do we have systems in place to build these ethically, or are we sort of building first and thinking later? So now we've gotten into the weeds with those ethical issues, and we want to take a step back and talk about when we know all of these possible harms, we know all of these sticky issues that we need to figure out, what actual rights should we have as educators and just as people who use technology tools in everyday life? Because there are so many ways that AI can be misused. It can be used for harmful purposes. It can be unintentionally used in ways that are unethical. And then also these larger issues of sustainability that we need to figure out as a society. So it's important for us to be educated and to be clear about what expectations do we have for what rights we should have and how we should be respected in the age of AI.
All right, so we're going to start off this section with story time. This sweet little girl, this picture represents my friend's daughter, although it is an AI generated picture because we didn't want to put her picture on the internet. So this year, my friend's daughter is having a great time in first grade. She's really rocking it. Her teacher had the idea to do some fun holiday themed cards where the students could then write notes to family members. So she used AI to create Thanksgiving and Christmas kind of cards with student pictures. So she uploaded student school pictures into the AI model and then had it generate similar pictures to what's shown here. So, my friend was less than excited that her daughter's data, her face, was put into an AI model without, really consent. And honestly, when I was talking to my friend, she wasn't mad at the teacher. As Megan said, this wasn't an intentional use or misuse of the child's data. This was a teacher doing something fun for her students who just didn't necessarily think about where data goes, which I think a lot of us haven't necessarily done yet as we use AI tools. But the repercussions now are that this little girl's picture is now been used and will now train a model, and there's no real way to get it back. So, is it a big deal to the parents? Yes. And possibly to this little girl when she gets older and she has the ability to decide if she wants her image used for that type of thing. Yes. And also, you can see in the first picture, it's already AI created. But if you look at the second picture, like there are no flaws on this adorable little first grade face. And it just kind of breaks my heart that that's the standard. We're already trying to reach for perfection in skin and all that. Anyways, that was for free. That was an aside. That was not in my notes. Okay, back on track to our educator rights and usage rights. Story time's over.
So, sort of building on that story, you as teachers have professional standards for how you're expected to treat students, how you're expected to handle student data, how you're expected to interact with parents. As an educational researcher, I have similar ethical standards where when I work with teachers and students, I have certain rules I have to follow about how I respect the privacy of the people I do research with, their autonomy to decide if they want to be a part of my study or not. Um, and AI companies need to be held to the same standards that we as professionals hold ourselves to treat students and to treat teachers with respect and to be careful about how we handle data. So we have some sort of fundamental rights that we want to share with you all to get you thinking about, what rights should we have and what ethical rules should these companies be following when they are creating tools that we might use in the classroom or just in our everyday life. So first off, going back to what Amanda shared earlier about, these AI tools just being embedded in our websites and not being able to be turned off or us having to turn them off every single time, we should have the right to say no. We should be able to opt in to tools that we find interesting and useful, and we should be able to opt out when we don't trust a tool or they're not being clear about how they're using our data and we don't want to share our data with them. So this means that as we think about what tools we want to use in the classroom with our students or even just ourselves, thinking about what tools are respecting my right to say no, which ones are forcing themselves down my throat and saying, you're going to use this tool no matter what. I'm going to download it on your phone or your laptop without your permission, versus which tools are being respectful and saying, hey, here's how we use your data. Here's how it's being stored safely. Here's what you can do if you don't want to share it with us. A second right that is really, really important is the right to knowledge. Like today, sharing all of these ideas with you all about how these tools work and what the risks are, we all have the right to get this information from these AI companies directly of what is your environmental impact? What are you doing with people's data? Who has access to that data? Why are you collecting it? How is it being used? And what are you doing to keep it safe? So we also deserve to understand how these tools were designed and who's benefiting if we use them. Are they really designing these tools to support learning, or is there some alternate agenda? Is there something they're doing with our data? Are they selling it? Are they sharing it somehow with other companies? Understanding how they work, who has our data, and really what's the goal of these tools is important for us to be informed users of all these different technologies. And then finally, and really fundamentally, we should have the right to change our mind. I firmly believe that our data should always belong to us, but it's not necessarily put into practice right now. Lots of websites track us, lots of websites share our data and sell our data to other companies to build these social media profiles and these financial profiles of, oh, what might you buy? What ads could we show you? But fundamentally, our data should be ours, and it shouldn't be shared with other people, with other companies, without your explicit and informed agreement. It shouldn't be something hidden. It shouldn't be something you have to like find in a settings menu. It should be upfront to say, hey, who are you comfortable with us sharing this data with? And you should also get to remove your data from a tool if you don't want to share it anymore. Like the example with the photo, if that student decides, I don't want my photo to be on the internet, I don't want these AI tools to have my picture, there should be a way to remove it. And if those tools are not designed in a way that it can be removed, then they need to be redesigned because fundamentally we need to be respecting people's privacy and their data ownership. So these are just a few of many possible rights that we could advocate for as educators. So we encourage you to discuss these rights with your students and brainstorm with them to say, what other rights should we have in the age of AI? How can we assess these AI tools to see if they are respecting our privacy, our data ownership, our right to knowledge, and our right to say no? As Amanda mentioned earlier, helping students develop AI literacy, it's not just about understanding how it works, it's about becoming a critical technology user. So our students are questioning who built this and why did they build it? Why do they want my data? And is it something that I'm okay with? So having these conversations can help us all be more active and informed users of technology instead of passive consumers.
Okay, am I there? I just got a little thing that says, oops, something went wrong. Okay, then I'm just gonna keep going. Gotta love it. Okay, so where do we go from here? Our data is collected through purchases, apps, and social media. And what access are we giving away? I know that I signed up for Zoom and I didn't necessarily read all of the information that popped up that said, hey, do you agree to this? I clicked yeah, because I need to use Zoom. We've talked about how AI can be helpful, but how it can also create real problems with bias, privacy concerns, misinformation, and misuse. So where do we go? First, we need stronger laws. I really think back to what Megan was saying, we need to think about with building in our environment. Like that's something I wanted to burst in and say, oh my gosh, we need to talk about this. But I even read the slides beforehand and I'm still thinking, oh, we need to talk about this more. What is happening? Anyway, sorry. Side note, we need stronger laws. Technology is moving faster than policy. And right now, people are being harmed before protections are in place. So, for example, in Denmark, they have moved toward giving people legal control over their own likeness, their voice, their face, their body, which seems like a no brainer. And So unauthorized deepfake content can be challenged and removed, and it's an example of a country trying to modernize laws for the AI era. In the United States, lawmakers have also introduced legislation such as the Defiance Act, which would allow victims of non-consensual explicit deepfakes to sue the people who created them and then seek removal. It also targets those who intentionally create the explicit materials rather than holding the platform accountable. I mean, we could go into that as well because I do feel like the platform should be accountable in some instances, but that's a whole other can of worms that we'll probably talk about later. um, but like, does the platform need to police itself? I don't know. Whether we like it or not, students are exposed to AI, and the best defense for them is to learn how to use it safely and responsibly. AI is not just a technology issue, it's a human issue. The future of AI depends on the choices we make now. And so, how can we teach our students to use it responsibly? Like, this is a community effort. Parents and teachers and everyone kind of needs to be involved in it, and lawmakers. Oh, yeah. And
All right, so as we wrap up, we have some resources we'd like to share with you. Thinking back to when we first started and we talked about all the things that we believe students should know, those four main areas of what is AI and how does it work and how to use it responsibly and the ethical and social impacts. We have resources for you surrounding all of those things from kindergarten through high school, and we would love to share that with you. So on our next slide, we have a link and a QR code, and that's going to take you to 6 different front and back documents. Some are intended to help you build your own literacy as a teacher. And then others are intended to help you teach your students. They have like teaching resources on them. So we hope that you find these very beneficial. We'll also share this link with Next Tech so that it will go with all of the month-long resources, so it'll be there as well. And as we wrap up, we do have, I think, one more slide. Awesome. Jenna put the link to that in the chat. Thank you, Jenna. If you would like to get your PGP certificate, you can use this link to get that for today. And then we're going to hang around to answer whatever questions you have with our remaining time. So you are welcome to put questions in the chat or unmute yourself, whatever you are more comfortable with, but we are happy to hang around and answer questions. Thanks so much for joining us today.